Welcome to the Eastern Sector Development Team Forum. Today's forum is focused around ageism and elder abuse, and we really wanted to highlight the work that's happening across the region and use it as a way to think about what does this mean for our CHSP services and how can we ensure that something that happens once a year in terms of World Elder Abuse Awareness Day is used as a platform to make this an ongoing commitment and an ongoing piece of work in our organizations, and not just something that we think about once a year, but actually we use the day as a driver for continual change and reflection on our own views, and then maybe what our organization and our staff and volunteers are involved with. So before we officially begin, I'd like to acknowledge that wherever we're meeting on the lands of Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander elders, depending on where you are in the country. If you happen to be in the Torres Strait Islands, you're very lucky people. Would quite like to be there and escape the Melbourne winter. I'm meeting on the lands of Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise that sovereignty was never ceded. In terms of what we've got coming up for today, very happy to have a panel discussion with Sharon Porteous, Richard Joseph and Anna Makedonskaya. So Sharon, Richard and Anna are going to be talking to us about what they've been doing and what other councils have been doing across the EMR to address ageism through the Tackling Ageism campaign. And then we're going to be looking at a presentation from Elders' Rights and thinking about the work that they do, and really then having a bit of a reflection on what is it that we're doing ourselves as an organisation and what can we do and what do we need to do. So what we thought would be quite useful is to have a bit of a conversation and a little bit of a panel discussion with the different people across the region who are involved in tackling ageism at a local level. Sharon, if I can start with yourself. So you're the Healthy Aging and Engagement Coordinator for the Inner East PCP, and you've been really involved in the Every Age Counts campaign and helping connect it to our local councils. How did you get involved with it, and why is it such an important campaign to be part of?
Yeah, thank you, Dale. I appreciate the time just to talk a little bit about it. I suppose in a general sense with the Inner East Primary Care Partnership, we are all about collaborating and partnering with organisations in our catchment around health issues and aiming to improve the health and wellbeing of our community. And really the focus of our work is very much in the primary prevention space. So working on a campaign around ageism really does fit into that space. So I've been in my healthy aging, wearing my healthy aging hat, I've been meeting with the councils probably since about 2018, particularly the council officers that work in the more upstream area. So rather than the service delivery, more in the positive aging, age-friendly communities kind of space. And we wanted to work together on something that would have an impact across the whole region. So ageism really stood out to us as something that we could do together in a collaborative way. And we were also seeing quite a lot of really great research coming out from the Benevolent Society and also internationally, you know, through the World Health Organization, and also Ashton Applewhite and her activism happening at that time. So we really thought this would be a great piece of work, and the councils were really excited about working together. Really, you know, coming together as 7 councils to work on a campaign like this we felt that we made a collective impact than every council just doing their own thing. And we had the National Every Age Counts campaign that came from the Benevolent Society research. So that was established and getting going and getting a lot of traction. So we were really pleased to be able to tap into that. So rather than creating something new This was a well-researched, evidence-based campaign with a lot of resources that we could link into. So we weren't having to put our energy and resources into creating something new and different. So it just really all came together probably in the second half of 2019. And we agreed that we'd roll out a shared communications campaign with shared messaging and coordinated timing on that. And it was about raising awareness and busting some of those myths, or breaking down some of those ideas that we all have around what it is to be older or ageing, and try and change our thinking around that. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Unfortunately, we planned to run the campaign in 2020 and got railroaded by a global pandemic. So really pleased to say that we embarked on it instead this year. So we started working, well, we've kind of been working on it on and off, but the serious external campaign started in May and is going through until October.
Now, we probably have a really good understanding of what overt ageism is and what overt ageist behaviours or attitudes look like. But often what we know is a lot of the issues or the problems sit in the subconscious or the grey area that may not be that overt, may not be that obvious to everyone. Do you have some examples of some of that subtle forms of ageism that maybe we're not aware of?
Look, I had to think long and hard about this sort of question, but yes, I suppose I can draw on some general ideas. We definitely know that ageism is something ageist attitudes and behaviours is something that we've developed at a very, very young age. So, you know, down the track, it's really important to try and target much younger people in this sort of a campaign. But we've heard, you know, there's been some great research done, for example, through Women's Health East and older women, and also with Eastern Community Legal Centre and their work in opera. And we've heard that, you know, people tend to feel invisible as they get older. So that, you know, I don't know if people have experienced, you know, going into a business or a shop and just not being seen, or people's views not really being taken seriously because they're older. We know that people do get treated differently, and that can really affect people's confidence. And, you know, even in New South Wales recently, there was some research done around accessing health services. And people, it was very clear from that research that people are treated differently in health services as they're older. So I've heard examples of, you know, people's health issues not being taken seriously, being put down to, oh, that's because you're older, and not really being given the opportunity to follow up and deal with those health issues in a way that a younger person might be. And that's just really, you know, completely ageist and not fair. We also know there's some more recent research from the Australian Human Rights Commission that they do in conjunction with employers, and still, even though it's reducing a little bit, but still employers, there's quite a lot of employers, I think it was about 12%, who would not consider employing or interviewing someone over the age of 55. The percentages increase as the age increases, so it increases to something like 20% if you're over the age of 60, for example. So job opportunities are much limited, and we do know, and this was raised with the pandemic, we also know that it takes a lot longer for people who are older to regain employment. So there's things like that there's some really good examples of.
Yeah, I think they're fantastic examples, and anyone who hasn't sort of either listened to the podcast that we've done or seen the research that's come out from Eastern Legal Community Centre and all the work that they're doing around sort of ageism and elder abuse, you know, we'll provide the links and things to that, because it is really useful. And I think not only maybe is there sometimes things that we're subtly unaware of, but there's the things that we're consciously accepting of. So, which is some of the things that you were talking about there. We consciously accept that views around particular age groups are a particular way, and that's what we have to really kind of challenge and fight against. In terms of the outcomes that you're looking for, or that the campaign's looking for, what are they, and what's sort of hoping to be achieved?
Yeah, well, the campaign's really about raising awareness, because we know that ageism in the general community is not really well understood, or the term's not really accepted that well. And that's something else that came out, particularly with the OPRA research, even amongst older people. So hopefully raising a bit more awareness in the eastern region about what ageism is, and what the impacts of that, the harmful impacts of that can be, and to challenge some of our thinking around what it is to age and get older. Obviously, ageism is not something that only relates to older people. It is something definitely that younger people experience as well. But this campaign is particularly focused on older people. But we also know that these sorts of communication campaigns for a short amount of time don't necessarily change those deep-seated attitudes and behaviours. So the work is really ongoing, and I think that's the beauty of having the 7 councils involved, is that they have such good connections with their communities. They have a remit to improve the health and wellbeing of their communities, and they're incorporating a lot of this work into their ongoing plans and thinking about how they can be less ageist, but also more age-friendly in the local communities. And thinking also about what other interventions would have some ongoing impacts, such as what intergenerational activities could they invest in and, set up or keep going with.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a fantastic segue to bring in Richard and Anna, and you've done it perfectly for me there. I almost don't even need to ask the question, but Anna, I might start with you, just going off what Sharon's been talking about there, and how councils are then able to embed this work within, I guess, and across all of the services that they have and all of the way that they engage with the community. Could you explain maybe some of the activities or projects that Whitehorse City Council's been involved with?
Thank you, Dale. I will just probably start from the beginning of the project when we become involved. And the most important thing that PCP had, I would say, it was a master stroke. They involved not only community development and aged care services into the project, but communication departments of the councils. And it's all started some time ago. I don't remember what year was it. Maybe it was 18. Sharon would remember, when PCP invited Ashton Applewhite, when my life changed. In 2 hours, I become converted, because as soon as you become aware, you can't become unaware. You see it, you hear it everywhere. And it's probably at that time, communication departments were invited to that meeting, and I think that was the master stroke and the seed. And from that time, it was very easy. I don't know why, but it was very easy. I know why, because communications were involved and managers were involved, and it was very easy to implement a lot of activities. We presented at Whitehorse, we presented to the executive group, who were very positive and embraced the project. They supported us, and CEO offered for us to present at the managers group, and ask for all managers to give us time to present to their teams. We had the door open. We've developed sort of training package with different time. We started with our team and presented 15-minute taster, and then COVID happened. And when we sort of relaxed a little bit, we presented 1-hour training, and you could see how people started to connect the dots because the conversations happened. From there, we know that a report went to council, and it was discussed at council. Council adopted the recommendations to sign the pledge, and the campaign was launched at a volunteer event with mayor signing the pledge, which was fantastic. We know the other week, when was it, this week or last week, when the mayor was interviewed by Perth Radio, and he was talking beautifully about the campaign, which means we're hoping, we know that campaign is finishing in October, however, it is ongoing work, and we're committed to educate or inform all areas of council. And we're very determined, brick by brick, slowly, slowly.
That's great. And Richard, in terms of Maroondah City Council becoming involved and some of the activities that you've been engaged with, is there anything sort of similar or different to the story that Whitehorse and the journey that Whitehorse has been on?
Yeah, I think there's some overlap and there are some differences as well. I think the overall ageism campaign has been it is a great campaign in the sense that it provided a template for councils to utilize, and they could either scale up if they wanted to, or just do what was on the template. And I think we've seen different councils respond differently in the activities or the projects. For Maroondah, what we've done is that it's similar. We've got buy-in from internally from our directors, from the councillors, so that they're all very much aware of what ageism is. And we were fortunate that our current mayor had actually attended Ashton Applewhite's talk, and so she was really on board with it, and she did a very good video message as well. In terms of the promotional things like promotional materials, we've looked at what we can do. We've had some extra not extra. We had some funding left over, so we were able to get some promotional materials like picture frames and bookmarks to circulate to people. On top of presenting to internal staff, so we're adopting an internal sort of awareness campaign first within council, and then we'll be spreading it out to community groups as well. And we're quite pleased that the Eastern Regional Libraries have come on board with us. We've met with them and we've spoken to them about some collaboration. And we are actually going to launch a short story competition starting next week for school children to write about their a positive story about an older person in their life. How has that person shaped them or influenced them? So that's going to be launched next week. So we're quite pleased with that, and we're hoping to continue our collaboration with the libraries for further, I suppose, activities around ageism. I just wanted to come back to what Dale, you asked about the some of the impacts, I suppose, the subtle effects. I think we've like Anna, I wasn't very much aware of ageism when I started my job, probably in 2018. But being aware of it, we commemorate World Elder Abuse Awareness Day every year on the 15th of June, but we don't sort of link it to what the root cause is, which is ageism. And I liken it. I think people probably understand things like family violence, where the start of family violence is the lack of respect, and that's where sexism comes in. It's the same for racism as well, where we've seen some some extreme ends of racism, where there are deaths, there's assaults, and it starts with disrespecting that individual on the basis of their race. And I think that's where we got to look at ageism as the start, the disrespecting of the older person. And I think we need to look at why is that. There's a wider narrative here, and I came across this saying, which which states it's quite a paradox that we all want to live a long life, all of us do, but we don't want to get old. So there's that paradox there, and what is it about the stigma of aging? We hear the subtle effects, the jokes, we hear in when we hear sexist jokes or racist jokes. Same, we hear ageist jokes, oh, you're over the hill, you don't have many birthdays left, or even saying to someone, do you think that's a bit inappropriate for you to wear at your age, or you look good for your age. There's a few really good resources around why it's not a compliment when someone says you look good for your age, it's not a compliment. So, we need to be really aware of those subtle types of ageism, which we have accepted, throughout our life. And we normalize it. Same when we go to the doctors and the doctors say, oh, it's just down to old age. Your dodgy knee or arm is down to old age, but your other arm is fine, or your other leg is fine, and it's still the same age, So we need to challenge some of those normalization of ageist language, ageist behaviors. And I think that's where this campaign is coming in, to raise awareness. Because when you think about the campaign on racism, on sexism, on homophobia, it all started with disrespect. So what we're trying to do is create that respect there, so that then we don't end up on the extreme ends of ageism, which is where you found elder abuse, which is what the Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety found.
Unfortunately, media is in the same basket, because when you read in the papers or on internet, even at 47, she still looks good. What hope do we have? When you see on the television, on the major free-to-air channel, grandmother and grandson, and grandmother was in her early 70s, participating in a game show, and the host saying, "You are killing it. People of your age are safely tucked in bed, and you're killing it," as a compliment. It's not that subtle.
No. And I think it absolutely talks to what everyone's been saying around the accepted nature of ageist values and views and language and things like that. And it's only, I really liked what you said, Anna, about once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's really, whether it's, ageism, sexism, racism, homophobia, whatever it is that we're trying to bring awareness to, once we see it and we recognize it, that's how we make it conscious, and we're then constantly trying to address our own behaviors, because we have to recognize that we are part of this society and we are not immune to it. And that's where we can see change in ourselves, and that's how we can help change the communities and the environments that we're in. I wanted to touch on, obviously, the demographics in your communities are different between Whitehorse and Maroondah, and between all parts of the EMR have different communities and different demographics. How has this played into shaping your campaigns and working with the community more broadly?
I think our communities are different from Whitehorse. When you look at our demographic in Maroondah, it is predominantly your white Australian. So we do have small pockets. We do have a few senior citizens groups of our Greek community, our Italian community, and our Dutch, but they're very small. So predominantly it is your white Australian. So we take that into account. So when we promote our the awareness of ageism, we actually have to go out to meet them at their venue, because that's where most of them are familiar with. So our senior citizen centers, the venues where our Dutch older residents and our Greek residents and our Italian residents meet. That's where we will go to create the awareness of ageism. But it is it is difficult, and I think we've seen some pushback even from older people who have said that they don't experience any form of ageism. And I liken it, like I said, it's the same when you approach some women as well, or even men. They say they have not experienced sexism, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So that's where I think the awareness is to identify the sorts of language, behaviors, that are ageist, because people don't know that they are ageist. You know, they just think, oh, I'm just making a joke, don't take offense, and things. And that's the kind of pushback that you get when you call things out. And I think one of these important things in the campaign, besides raising awareness, is the call to action, is to, not just take the pledge, not just do the quiz, but also call it out. When you hear someone saying you look good for your age, call it out. Says, what do you actually mean by you look good for your age? Why can't you say you look good, full stop? Why do you have to add that for your age? And I think that's where for some it will require some education. For some people, it might require a longer period of I suppose, campaigns or awareness raising for them to accept that their behavior or their language is actually not in keeping with our current moral standards.
I will pick it up from here, Richard. Thank you. Although we have geographical differences, obviously, and demographical differences, we started the campaign with more focus on internal council staff from within out. CEO promoted the campaign through the newspaper to all staff. We're planning the article in the Whitehorse News. We've got the website going, and we're asking people to take the pledge, but it is more about education. We're currently planning for the health and well-being plan, and it's directed through communications and consultations and research of the themes that would be addressed and that will direct our future actions. And we know already the early signs that ageism is high on the agenda. And we know from the research from, as Sharon mentioned previously, that ageism is definitely on the agenda. Therefore, there would be opportunities to plan according to the community needs and community specificities. And we hope to continue further, obviously, tackling it from the internal focus as well.
Thank you both. That's great. And I think it's really interesting to see how you, and I think it's the right approach to start internally, get your staff on board, actually have them understand what it is that you're trying to do before going out to the community, because there is a risk that you do a community campaign, the staff don't understand, they're not on board, and you can actually have some pushback and things like that. As is always the way, I have many, many more questions than we're going to have time to go through. But there's obviously people who are thinking, well, what do I do to get involved? Or I don't really know where to begin. What would your advice be to them about where to start or how to get involved?
Perhaps I can answer that, Dale. I've just actually put in the chat the link to our webpage on the campaign. And I think a few times Anna and Richard have both mentioned the pledge. So just to tell people a bit more about that. So the Every Age Counts national campaign, part of that is to sign or take a pledge to stand for a world without ageism, and that's on their website. There's links from our webpage to that, and all of the councils have that as well. So that's what we're actually asking people to do, is to sign that pledge or take that pledge. It's not actually a physical signing, but you can post a photo of yourself doing that and put it into social media. There's also an Am I Ageist quiz, which is can be quite revealing in terms of determining, where perhaps have you got some deep-seated views around age that you maybe even didn't realise that you had. So that's also, the links are on our website that takes you to Every Age Counts. And there's a fantastic video that Brian Brown has narrated called Imagine a World Without Ageism, and the link is there for that. It's very short and it's really brilliant. So we're asking people in terms of their own awareness to do those things. But also, if you do live in the region, follow your council on their social media, because they are actually putting out messages on their social media. And we really like to see broad coverage of those. So follow them, like them, comment on them, and you know, that would be really great. And we're actually collecting some data around that in terms of the engagement with all of the councils. And as you've heard, they're all putting their own slant on it, which is really fantastic. You know, there's flexibility for councils to do what they can within their resourcing, but they've all had some brilliant ideas and doing things a little bit differently.
Can I add that forming local partnerships are very important? And I just want to acknowledge PCP's lead role in that project, because it was absolutely the key to success. They supported us with resources, with advice, with pulling things together. And you know that you're not walking alone. And it's very, if you can, working with others will support you along this journey.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Anna.
I think that's absolutely a fantastic point to kind of start to wrap this conversation up. We can't underestimate the amount of time and effort that goes into these sorts of partnerships, and we do need to value them. And if we are part of a partnership, we need to be an equal contributor, because we can't just suck all the life out of Sharon or others who are leading in this work. Richard, was there anything that you wanted to end on in regards to the work that Maroondah's been involved with? Anything that we sort of haven't covered that you thought was a really important thing to highlight?
I would just say that, you know, for people, firstly, to understand what ageism is. So, you know, the first thing to do is, like, say, watch the video narrated by Brian Brown. It's a very good video. It gives you a good introduction about what ageism is and the impacts. I just put a link into the chat, that video, to say why you shouldn't say you look good for your age. And I think that's also another great resource. So I would encourage this: if you watch it first, see if you can share it with your team, to create that ripple effect where, you know, the more that people are aware of you know, what ageist language is, what ageist behaviors are, you know, the better we will become. So I'll just say, you know, have a look at those videos, and we can put, I think Sharon's got a list of other resources as well, that I think is in the well as well, Sharon. Yep. So
Yeah.
that's a plug for in East Primary Care Partnership. There's a resource called the Well, which has quite a number of resources there. So I think Sharon will probably put that link in there so that people can go in and have a look at some of the resources.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard, Anna, and Sharon. It's been absolutely fantastic to talk to you about this. And, you know, we posed the question at the beginning in the chat: what parts of your service are vulnerable to ageism, ageist views, behaviors, and actions? And if not all, most people would have said, from what we were reading, all parts of our organization, all parts of our service, because we're hopefully, and now it's been reinforced, understanding that we are all susceptible and we all live in an ageist society, in an ageist environment, and therefore we too have ageist views and behaviors, and we need to call them out. We need to check where they live, where they exist, and continually make sure that we're doing all that we can to address and remove these ageist views and beliefs. So thank you very much for joining us. We're going to now move on to the next part of the agenda. So we're very lucky to have with us Pauline and Artie from Elders' Rights Advocacy. And Elders' Rights Advocacy supports older people, their families and representatives in Victoria to address issues related to Commonwealth funded aged care services. So they're also a member of the National Older Persons Advocacy Network, which you would know as OPAN. And they're also involved in delivering the National Aged Care Advocacy Program. So we're very fortunate to have them talk with us today. So if I could invite them to take themselves off mute and join us. They've got a bit of a presentation to take us through.
Thank you very much. I believe I'm going to speak first, and I just wanted to say I've just come in. My timing was impeccable, but I came in to hear you, Dale, wrapping up about your discussion on ageism and the fact that you acknowledge that we all have ageist views and beliefs that we have to be constantly aware of. And I'm very aware of that in the work that I do, but I know that I sometimes make ageist judgments or valuations. So I think it's something that we all really need to be aware of. So that's my little reminder to all today. Now, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to outline elder rights advocacy services and how we may be able to assist your recipients. Elder rights, I know, I can see some names that I know or have experienced, but I'll just go briefly through because there's been a lot of change. And so elder rights advocacy is the Victorian service delivery for the Older Persons Advocacy Network. Now, up until 2017, there was the NACAP, National Aged Care Advocacy Program, was delivered independently by different organisations in each state, and they varied enormously. There was a review conducted in 2016, and that recommended that the program should become a national program. There was a need for more consistency of standards and service, and it recommended there be an open tender. Now, certainly at that point, ERA, as we call ourselves, was the smallest agency and it only had the one program, whereas in other states they were much bigger with other programs. But ultimately, all of the agencies decided to form a new body, which is a company limited by guarantee, and it doesn't do anything other than hold the contract and have a secretariat that manages the contract. So OPAN itself doesn't deliver services other than it has a fabulous website, which I hope you'll all refer to. So that's where we stood in 2017. And as a result of the review, there was an increase in funding. And so for ERA, we went from 3 advocates to 6 advocates, 3 that were regionally based. And that was a tremendous improvement, 100% increase, not very many organizations get that at the time. So that led to some significant changes. And over the years since then, we've been working with the OPAN Secretariat to develop some consistency of service standards. But that's just a little bit of the background for you to understand. And then coming from the Royal Commission, there was a further recommendation that the advocacy program should be extended again. And that has been acted upon, and the government has already announced indications of increased funding. So we're going to have another increase in funding, which will lead to further advocates. And also there's been some supplementary programs. So it's in recognition, and I think the recognition came from service providers who could see the need. It also came from the Royal Commission and from advocating that has been done from very many organisations. But what do we do? I'll just recap. We provide a free and independent and confidential information and advocacy service for anyone receiving Commonwealth funded aged care. And so that's people in residential aged care, home care packages, CHSP, transition care, flexible care, and of course, respite. We have a toll-free telephone number, and that's usually the first point of contact. Many of the people coming to us are referred to us through people such as yourselves, service providers. And you do have an obligation to provide information about the advocacy program. So that's important to keep in mind. And I'll just let you know again that we do have brochures that we can send out to any of the service providers. And we also, with the increased funding, we were able to have the brochures translated into all of the community languages. So be mindful of that. So that's where, and so what we do initially is we provide information to people as to their rights, as to what their expectations should be about the standard of care and services that they're getting with any of the areas that we cover. And so a lot of the original calls are just information, and people can be quite reluctant to take any action at that point. But we do take them through their options, and the options include either supporting them to advocate on their own behalf on the issue, or if necessary, we can be the advocate for them and provide directed advocacy for them. Quite often people they take in the information and then they decide that they will leave it at that point. They just wanted confirmation as to their rights or whatever. But quite often it's because they're afraid to take the matter up. And there's two main reasons for that, and I'm sure you understand those reasons. One bit, the predominant one, is they're afraid that there will be some repercussion if they raise the matter with their service provider. And of course, as you know, that is completely in contradiction to their rights and to the standards under which the services should be provided. Interestingly, and particularly in residential aged care, people will choose not to raise it, and it's for a very different reason. And they say that that the support workers, the people delivering the care, it's not their fault. They understand it's not their fault. It's because there's not enough staffing. They're not highly trained sufficiently, and that people will not raise the matter because they don't want to put further stress or burden on the support workers or carers, because they recognize that it's not their fault. So I think that that's always very important to keep in mind when you're dealing with people. And my response to that is I say, well, I hear that you're saying that you appreciate the care that you're getting, but there's systemic problems with it. And so maybe if we raise it, we can actually improve the conditions for the support workers or the carers. So that's a good way of getting around that matter. The calls that come to us have increased enormously recently because of the media focus on aged care, both home care packages and residential aged care, and the Royal Commission. The majority of the calls that we take would relate still to residential aged care. I think it's probably about a 70-30 breakdown there, though home care packages and CHSP is growing enormously in the number of calls that we're taking. So people, the care issue has become very significant, both in the delivery of care in residential and home care packages. And of course, last year with COVID, there was great concern because of in residential because of the lockdowns, but also with home care packages because providers responded differently. Some providers still had their support workers going in, some restricted them going in, some had case managers making contact with them, and the reports from other recipients is that they had no contact at all during that period. So because of that, we're getting a huge increase in the home care package issues. And there's been significant changes over the last 2 years into how home care packages are being delivered, and that's creating a lot of questions and concerns. And for anyone in that sphere, I think we know that allowable items have become the hot topic. There is so much confusion around what can be funded by a package, and particularly for people who've been on packages for a period of time, things that they previously had funded are not being funded now. And so that contradiction is really challenging to them. So it's a matter of, for us, of trying to work with them to identify their assessed care needs and see how we can make an argument using the various matrices that the department require to get that item funded, because a lot of the people on packages would be financially straitened. So I'll give you an example of a call I had earlier this week. It was a lovely 84-year-old lady who initially presented herself as having a disagreement with her provider. And it was because she expressed that it was the tone that was taken by the case manager in how she explained that the requested items would not be funded. And it was a tone that the caller felt was disrespectful. And of course, we know they're entitled to dignity and respect at every level of their treatment with any provider. And as I worked through it, I found out that the lady herself was vision impaired. She came from a Middle European background. She was preparing her own food because it was to her cultural tastes and her own personal tastes. And they were very time-consuming, rich dishes. And her stove had broken. And so the provider's response was, well, we can provide you with delivered meals. But of course, they weren't going to satisfy her. I can see your face, Dale. And there was no way that they were going to satisfy that lady because it was completely out of course. And so although when she first contacted us, it was about the tone and the disrespect, she had accommodated herself to the fact that they wouldn't fund those two items. Anyway, I talked through, and because I had discovered that she was vision impaired, I talked about other aides that might be able to assist her. And in the end, by the end of our conversation, she decided that she would like advocacy and she would like to pick up the question of the stove and the dishwasher again. So I contacted the provider. And as a result of our contact with the provider, that lady has now been approved. Half of the cost of the stove has been funded and half of the cost of the dishwasher, because that was presenting a hygiene problem for her, because she had to feel, she was totally blind in one eye and very limited sight in the other. So she had to feel her pots and pans to see if there was encrusted food on them before she used them. It was, totally unacceptable. And she has now been approved for a lightweight portable wheeled walking frame, so that her friends who are equally as old as she can manage lifting the frame into their car boots to take her out, because she had stopped going out because the frame she had was too heavy and cumbersome. So that you can see, when we work in partnership with the providers and the recipient, we can resolve things to at least to an improved satisfaction of the person concerned. So I just thought it would be useful for you to see, particularly home care providers, because I know that you are feeling under enormous pressure with the change guidelines, but there are ways to at least get some movement on that. So just on that, in terms of what we're finding, other issues that we're finding, the fees and charges have become a really significant issue. And some of the providers are really, some of the recipients are really savvy in their analysis of the breakdowns of the fees and charges. I spoke to a gentleman yesterday, and he informed me that he had an IQ of 140. I felt quite insignificant in comparison. So I figured that he was able to really do the figuring, but a lot of other of the recipients are not. So, and there's a lot of uncertainty, there's such varying use of language. And so case management and what people get for case management is an area where it's not clearly explained to people. And the government uses self-directed case management, which of course we know is not possible with a home care package. And increasingly there is a tension, because a lot of the families have family members who are on NDIS plans where they can be fully self-managed. And so this is a tension, because they want that same independence and control that they're getting there, and they have difficulty in understanding that they can't get it in the home care package area. So that's, and that's going to be one that's going to be ongoing for a significant time. Now, in 2019, we had increased COTA Victoria was funded for what is called the Navigator program, and they've been doing community education around aged care rights and services available, Commonwealth funded aged care services available. And as part of that program, they've mostly been working in community centres and with ethnic groups and call groups and aged care groups. But there was the funding for one position called a navigator, and we have that position at ERA. And the navigator can help people either make contact with My Aged Care and get registered, because a lot of people were not aware of that, but also they can assist them in working through which provider they may elect to take up with. Because we're independent, we can't recommend anyone, but we can work through the costs and the fees and charges and build a comparison scale for them so that they have a better understanding of and raise all the questions that they need to ask. And often we're able to get someone to support them in that meeting. So that position has been well and truly used. And because of that, it's now going to be extended to 2 positions. But from the point of view of the people I'm speaking with today, unfortunately, we've been required to change the focus to Western Metropolitan Melbourne. So we're not going to be able to help anyone in your area, but the COTA is still running programs in that area. So that's another program that has been extended in recent years. With the navigator, when they're overwhelmed with work, the advocates such as myself will take on that role of a navigation role. And I think you're all aware that as a result of the Royal Commission, it has been recommended that there will be care finders funded going forward when the budget is resolved. And so that will extend that service hopefully across Victoria. The other program that we have been dealing with in a small way is the Community Visitors Scheme. And I'm sure you're all aware of that. Initially, that was for a volunteer visiting someone in residential aged care. Then it was extended to home care packages, people at home. And when quite a lot of the providers, perhaps some I'm speaking to now, withdrew in 2019 because of the way that the funding was being allocated. So ERA was able to pick up some of the regional programs, but again, we've been told that the funding for that is going to be changed significantly, but also the terms of that. But in the meantime, that is available. And for the people I'm speaking with in the eastern suburbs, you would have to go through the MS Society if you wanted to match someone. Unfortunately, I believe that there is quite a wait at the time. I'm just mindful of time and I've lost a bit of my focus on time, I'm sorry. I'll just talk briefly about, we do come across a lot of elder abuse in our work, as I'm sure you all do. And it's a very difficult area to navigate. We can only assist in the areas that are within the scope of our service. So in residential aged care, we do find a lot of financial abuse being undertaken by family members, and that's withholding money, or it's spending money and not providing an explanation to it for the resident. And it can be neglect, not providing what the resident needs. So one of the examples I've had recently was a woman, she's 99 and a half, and I was determined to get everything resolved before the 100th birthday. She has a nephew who is her financial power of attorney. He lives across the border in South Australia, and he very rarely visits. And she asked for information, and each time she's asked, he's refused to give it. Not obviously refusing, but just avoiding it. He just pretends it doesn't exist. So obviously that's created concern with her. She initially wanted to know if she could she had enough money to buy a new TV because her TV was on the blink. And she wasn't getting the answer. And then she's become very distressed. The facility tells me that her health has deteriorated recently, and they think it's the stress because of that. So after a lot of conversation with her, I obtained her permission, because we need to determine that we have the consent at every level, the consent of the recipient, or if they're not able to give consent, their carer. So she asked me to speak with the nephew. And it was not a very pleasant conversation, particularly from the nephew's wife, who grilled me, and they were obviously very controlling people, just in personality, I would say. Anyway, he agreed to provide the requested bank statement. He sent it to her with no letter of explanation, just a one-page bank statement that it's been very difficult for me to get to understand as she tries to read it out to me over the phone. Anyway, we've been assured that her bank account is still very healthy, and her trust account is still very healthy. I was able to determine her pension. She didn't know how much pension she was getting. She didn't know where it was going. She didn't know the amount of the cost of the fees and the aged care facility. So at least we've been able to allay her fears. But I thought that was a very good example of being completely disrespectful of that woman, in that sending the information after many, many requests, but without any explanation. Now, whether they're offended that there's been it's been looked at, but whatever, that was just, to me, an appalling example. And others that we come across in residential aged care is when families refuse medication on the basis that the dementia is incurable, or that they have dementia and can't suffer pain. And we see those same sorts of things in home care packages, where, particularly in cases where adult children may have returned home because they may have lost their disability pension, with the tightening of that, they may be drug or alcohol issues, and they want to stop people going into the home because they don't want to see evidence of the abuse that may be taking place. It may be psychological, it may be physical, it may be financial. But certainly, interestingly, in the last few years, the abuse of recipients of Commonwealth funded aged care across all fields have increased. The driver in many cases is financial. Families are upset about the co-contribution to aged care. They don't believe that should be the case, and that's money that they expected that they would inherit, so that they're taking steps to get that money out, and that's one of the main drivers. And the other, of course, as I mentioned, is often that there is psychological or drug or alcohol problems that are affecting the behaviour of the adult child living at home with the, and they're very difficult, and sometimes we can help if it coincides with the packages or the residential care. At other times, we have to refer people to the services that I'm sure that you're all aware of. Senior Rights Victoria is a very good point of contact. In your area, Essendon, at the Eastern Community Legal Service is a great point of contact. There can be, through Better Places Australia and Relationships Australia, they have departments that will provide mediation and family counselling when the issue has become very highlighted. And of course, there is always the option of getting welfare checks in to monitor where you suspect elder abuse is going on. But from our point of view, you need to listen to the resident or the recipient, listen to them, show that you believe them and that you understand them, and don't show any value judgment at that point, because that can stop them further confiding in you. So I think that that's probably enough from me, and I believe my new colleague, Arati, is going to speak to us.
Thank you so much, Pauline. I think that was a really great overview and some really great insights into actually the role of yourself as an advocate and some of the really important work that you can help resolve and some of those issues that you can help resolve. The reason that my head went in my hands in horror about trying to not replace the oven, but just put that person onto delivered meals is it's a complete removal of that person's autonomy. It's de-skilling them. It's it's in complete opposition of everything that the policy direction from the Commonwealth Government is about, you know, supporting people to live an active and healthy life, and helping them remain independent. And from a wellness perspective of what we, you know, work very closely with our providers on, it's in complete contrast to that. So I think that alone is such a fantastic example of the role of an advocate, and such an important, I guess, outcome that you played in that. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Okay, so my name is Aarti. Thank you very much, Dale, for the invitation to speak today. I am the newly recruited diversity and inclusion worker at ERA. I'll just let you know a little bit about how we're structuring this diversity and inclusion work. It's we're looking at of course, our policies, procedures, and at our service delivery model. We're hiring with a view to getting a representative group representative of the community onto staff, as well as onto the board. We're doing internal upskilling, so training in intersectionality, cross-cultural communication, diversity, that sort of thing. So I'm just keeping, so my position, as I said, is very, very new, and I'm really glad to be meeting you all today, because what I'm trying to do is to design our diversity plan and my role into the future, informed by input from people on the ground. My experience is not in aged care, and I'm learning as fast as I can, but of course that's taking time. So what my role is doing outreach, hopefully at some point physically, to the aged care special needs groups and to NACAP's identified 3 groups, which is people with dementia, cognitive decline, and mental health issues. So doing outreach to these groups, talking about what we do in general, but also explaining what advocacy is. And advocate is a term of art. Not everyone knows what that constitutes. So breaking that down into ways in which we can help. And previous work experience has shown me that there are, within those special needs groups, there are a lot of people who are frightened of aged care, having had some institution experience in their past, whether it's out of home care or in-house in psychiatric facilities. People are reluctant to share a lot of information about themselves, and that actually comes down to the intake at various levels. We do not ask intrusive questions on intake. We are, again, aware that people are calling us for information, and our statistics and our reporting requirements are secondary to their comfort. We are not like a legal center, so we speak to the older person, but also their family members, representatives, and family members, of course, I keep stressing, is as defined by the older person. We have a very vigorous outreach community information and education program. So we talk about aged care in general, but rights and as well, more broadly. So that can be delivered, those sessions are delivered to community members, to workers, to residents, and to the workers in residential care. So these are, you can book this. And so please do go onto our website, have a look, and see if you're interested in any of, in booking a session. Go ahead, that's easily organized. Our advocates will, again, COVID permitting, our advocates will come out to you. And again, the good thing is that our advocates don't just talking about, say, residential care. We don't just go in and speak to the residents. We also speak to the facilities workers, because we do want to make sure that everyone is on the same page and that the obligations are mutual and reciprocal. So there's always that information and education of both. So my role, again, there is the outreach aspect, which is a little bit frustrated now because I'm unable to go out. But the other part, so the two bits that I want to talk to you about is the ambassador program. We have Catherine Barrett from Celebrate Aging. I'm not sure if anyone here knows Catherine, but she has designed an ambassador a program for us. So that, again, is part of our step-by-step process of doing diversity work. So we are, again, same focus, the special needs groups and the NACAP groups, getting people to speak to us about who they are, what aging is like in their communities, what they need from aged care, what they fear in aged care, and that's residential or community, and what possibly we could do to facilitate facilitate information awareness raising that might make their journey a little less scary. So we have, we're launching our first 3 ambassadors. They are all from the rainbow communities, and they'll be up on our website shortly. This June is Pride Month, so we're hoping to do it in June. And the idea is that not only are we making visible people who are not often visible on what one might call mainstream sites. So that is the first step, but we are also seeking out how we can improve our service model or our service delivery, modify, change it, tweak it based on the input from these ambassadors and groups. Now, I'm aware that the word ambassador or the individual standing up to represent a community may not suit everyone. So we'd be just as happy if the Maroondah Senior Citizens Club were to come on board and say, this is what we are looking for, these are our needs, these are our expectations in aged care, how can you assist? So we are very, very, flexible as we need to be. What I would really like and appreciate from the network is assistance in identifying communities in your areas. I know that Richard mentioned who was in his community, and I'd really, I'm aware that the demographic information is available, but just to get a little bit of specialized information, contacts, I'd very, very much appreciate having that input. Also, you are the experts, you work on the ground, I don't. So any input with regard to, from your personal work experience, that would be great. And yeah, look forward to seeing and hearing and being part of this.
Thank you so much. And absolutely, we have a fantastic network in the East. We do have a number of people who have been here for many years. We also have a steady increase of new members as well. But the one thing that I think we've, and when I say we, I mean Lisa and myself, have felt very fortunate about is that it's a community and a group that really do work together and actually get behind these sorts of initiatives. So we can connect you with individuals, and people are able to reach out to you directly as well. So thank you both.
Sorry, Dale, I forgot one thing. We are piloting a peer education project, and our peer education worker is focusing on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and on forgotten Australians. So these are the 2 groups that she will be recruiting from, and that would be the start of a peer education model in our community education program. So that's just great. So you'll know. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I think it's also really important for us to hear the organizational approach that ERA is taking and showing how diversity, wellness, inclusion, intersectionality is actually being embedded into all that you do. And that will only mean the best outcome possible for the people that you serve. So it's really, really great to see that approach. So thank you both for joining us. For the last sort of 10 minutes, what we're going to do is break people up into breakout rooms. And we're going to have a question for you as a group to discuss. And it could be about your organization or ageism or elder abuse more broadly. There's different questions for each group. And when we bring you out of the breakout groups, we'd just like a little bit of feedback from one person from each group. I wanted to give anyone an opportunity to feedback anything from their groups around the questions or the things that were raised there.
I'll just go with our group. Michelle, the two Michelles, and I think Jennifer was on the group. Where I think we all agreed that there was quite a meaty question. It's a bit hard to sort of discuss that in the time allocated. But we did, for like say as Maroondah, we started internally. We've got buy-in from our directors, from our councillors, and what we're doing, my colleague and myself, is that we're asked to be invited to team meetings so that then we can talk about ageism, we can show the video, we can tell people to take the pledge and the quiz as well. So we've done about 6 team meetings now, different departments, and we're continuing to do that internally. Michelle Scott also spoke about calling things out, because she gave the example about just like sexism, many years ago, we need to call things out. But we did recognize that it is difficult sometimes to call things out when it's a close family member or friend, because for fear of pushback, I suppose. So, but I think there's different ways that we can call it out. I mean, there's a subtle way. There's and for some, I give the example of a good friend of mine who does crack racist jokes every now and then, and I did say to him, look, I really like his, him as a friend, but don't like this part of him that does not respect other people's cultures. So there's a different ways of calling things out. I think we don't need to be combative in all situations.
Yeah, I think that's actually a fantastic example and advice that people can take on board. And that question, because each group had a different one, was looking at what does your organization need to improve on, or what can they do better. And it is sometimes a little bit confronting for us to think that we do need to do things better, or we do need to or our organization needs to do things better, and recognize that even if our own individual practice is quite good or at the standard it should be, doesn't mean that that's the same for everyone within the organization, or the policies and the structure that exists around the organization.
From the group that I finished up in, so their question was, how will you know that the work you are doing to address ageism is or will make a difference? And we kind of talked about information that was provided to consumers, as part of welcome packs around rights and responsibilities and the Charter of Aged Care Rights, and that the collecting feedback from clients is really important. But the people in my group, when they reflected on their questions, that they do get feedback from clients, they don't necessarily address whether clients are experiencing ageism as part of their organisation. So I think it's really important, if you're going to do this work, to be thinking about, what is the impact that we're making? What are people feeling? And then actually using that information to inform, changes to your practice, individual practice, or from a systemic organisational perspective.
And I think that's a really good example of knowing and being able to put something in place around ageism. Sometimes when we think about work, whether it's around ageism or sexism, racism, etc., sometimes it can sit up in the higher levels of, well, what do I do? How do I address that? But actually, that's a really good example of you are getting some feedback around, potential ageist views or attitudes or behaviors, and there are things that you can implement into that initial conversation and assessment process that looks and review process within care plans that looks to understand some of that. So I think that's a really good example.
And perhaps reviewing language that's used to make sure that it's clear and accessible.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you all for your participation today, to the speakers. It's been absolutely fantastic. I think it's really shown a great level of engagement and a willingness to continue to grow and learn about what we need to do in this space, and to ensure that we are actually addressing ageism, that we're correcting our own behaviours, and that we're trying to create a society that not only addresses ageism, but ends ageism. Please do keep in contact. Continue to use our online community of practice. If there's another forum or topic that is of interest, please let us know, and we will do everything we can to make that a possibility. I really do have to thank Sharon Porteous for all her work and support, not only just for creating the forum and participating, but being such an advocate for the sector and working really closely with all of our local government areas, and being part of our podcast series that we've developed. If you haven't had a listen to them, I highly encourage you to do so. Really good in-depth knowledge from people who are on the ground working in this field. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.